Welcome to the Commonwealth Matters. I'm Richard Nelson, Executive Director of the Commonwealth Policy Center. With me in the studio is State Senator Robby Mills. Robby, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Richard. Glad to be here.
Hey, it's good to have you join us. Of course, Robby represents the Senate 4th District, far west Kentucky. It's the Henderson, Princeton, Crittenden, Livingston County area.
Right.
And Robby, you are in session right now. This is where lawmakers from across the state, both Senate and House members, convene in our state capitol to address the issues of the day. And the reason I wanted to have you on the program was because you are carrying a lot of bills of interest. And one of those bills, actually on the way into the studio this morning that I heard about, was Senate Bill 2, which is the bill that requires voters to have a picture ID when they go to the polls to vote. I've heard critics say, Robby, that there is not a problem with voter fraud at the polls. What's your response that there's no fraud right now, that it's an undue burden on those who may not have a driver's license or an official ID? How do you respond to that?
Sure. I mean, it's just this is a simple bill, to be quite honest with you. When you boil it down, I mean, it's all about showing your driver's license, a photo ID when you vote, and it's all about confidence. It's building confidence in our election process, and there is voter fraud that goes on. It's just hard to detect, small in nature. But I think when you build confidence in the election process, you continue to make people's vote count, and that's how I would come back at them. We are making a lot of concessions in this bill. I mean, we're actually making free photo IDs available for folks that do not have a driver's license, a CDL. And they can get those at the circuit court clerk's office. So we're making it easy to comply. It's just, the normal kind of liberal pushback you might get on a bill like this.
Sure. So would you say that this is a preventative measure for potential voter fraud, potential wide-scale voter fraud?
It is. I mean, we have, if you go back a couple of years, the Secretary of State's office has seen multiple issues with maintenance of the voter rolls. I mean, we believe that there's probably 300,000 voters on the rolls that should not be on the rolls because they've either moved out or they've died.
So let's just to clarify that this is voters in Kentucky,
right?
Every county. Are we talking?
Yeah, throughout the state.
Do you know the normal procedure for cleaning up, if we use that term, cleaning up the voter rolls? How do you go about it? If somebody moves out of a district or if somebody passes away, what is the normal procedure?
There's usually postcards that will go out from the Secretary of State when people move. There are life events that people go through that generate these from the Secretary of State's office. And in the past, those cards have not gone out, and they have not done normal maintenance. Now, the reason that's important is because you have these 200 or 300,000 people that aren't voters, but their name's still on the rolls. That could leave things open to somebody coming in and voting in place of that person.
Sure, so long as those names are on the registered list, somebody, like you said, could disguise himself as that person. Right. And if there's no picture ID available or something to confirm who that person is, that opens itself to voter fraud. Yeah. 300,000.
300,000. It's a large number.
That is a large number. Now, so this bill would simply require that you have a picture ID, so your state driver's license would work.
Your state driver's license.
A passport would work.
It would.
And if you do not have a picture ID, do you have any idea how many Kentuckians don't have some kind of state or federal ID? Because that's what the bill requires. Right. How many are we talking about? Is it 10,000 or 50,000?
We're thinking it's around 50,000 number. 98.2% of folks used their driver's license during the last election in Kentucky. So we're talking about closing down the gap there, that 2% gap that folks used another ID, or they were recognized, quote unquote, recognized by the poll worker, and they were allowed to vote. So, when you close that gap, you build the confidence. And then there are also other things that Secretary Adams is looking to do. He's going to try to clean up the voter rolls. That takes a 2 or 3 year process. So this and cleaning up the voter rolls are two things that he ran on, and they were very popular on the campaign trail. If you ask a lot of the constitutional officers, they'll say, When Secretary Adams talked about photo ID required, it was very, very well received.
And of course, Secretary of State Michael Adams won pretty handily at
He
the
did.
ballot box. That was one of his primary issues.
He did.
To make sure that we know who's voting,
Right.
that they have a picture ID when they go to the polls to vote. And he's simply initiating now that he is in office. And you're the lead guy, though,
Right,
in the
I am.
State Senate.
Yep.
And
And
shepherd-
one of the things about Senate Bill 2 I think is very important is that the last 2 or 3 weeks we have gone way over to talk with anybody that wants to talk about this bill. Any kind of interest groups that were against it, had problems with it. Secretary Adams has met with them, taken input. We have a committee substitute that made some changes.
Yeah.
So this bill has changed since we filed it. We're working off what's called a committee substitute. And I just think that shows his efforts and our efforts to work and make this a workable solution and not something that is looked at as being kind of crammed down the other side's throat.
Sure, and I think that speaks well of your efforts and Secretary of State Adams' efforts to reach out and to address any concerns and allay any fears that might be there. So tell us right now, what kind of things do people in Kentucky need a picture ID for? Some people might say, well, it's not a big deal. You shouldn't have it. Don't worry. It's an undue burden for people at the ballot box. But what kind of things do people need a voter ID?
Just about everything in today's modern economy requires you to prove who you are. I mean, starting a checking account, cashing a check. I know checks are a thing of the past, but buying alcohol, buying cigarettes. Just the minimum things you have to prove. Who you are. So I don't think it's an undue burden. And matter of fact, I think that the free IDs that we're giving out at the clerk's office will even improve a lot of indigents' lifestyles by being able to say, this is who I am.
Sure. I'm thinking of going to the airport and getting through security at the airport. Yeah. It's something that's very common where you need a picture ID just about to do anything.
To get on a military base.
So Robby, one of the things I've heard with this bill is that this could actually help those who do not have a driver's license, those who don't have a passport, by giving them some kind of photo ID free of charge. By the way, there's money in this bill. Senate Bill 2 appropriates resources for those who don't have a picture ID.
It does. So, it's an easy process just to go to the clerk's office and bring a couple of documents. And then, also what this does too, you have to have a couple of documents to get this free photo ID. But if you can't afford your birth certificate, you can't find it, there's also a process once you get to the polls where you can sign an affirmation to say you are who you are, and then to check what your impediments were, and you'll be able to vote. So, that's one of the things about keeping it constitutional. We've got to make sure that when folks show up at the polls, they're able to vote. But we make sure that they are proving who they say they are.
Sure. So this, again, ensures that our elections are fair, that the results are accurate, and that nobody is going to the polls to vote that really shouldn't be there.
That's right. Exactly.
What are the chances? We're going to take a break in just a moment, but what are the chances of this bill passing?
I think it's very good. We have talked through our caucus. Of course, the Republican Party has majorities in both the House and the Senate, and those we have vetted this bill and have tried our best to make it a workable bill. I believe we'll have support from the Democratic side as well. So this will probably be sent to the governor's office, and more than likely, we're hoping that since he's in a conciliatory manner, he may sign this, and it'll be law.
Okay, very good. If you're just joining us, you are watching the Commonwealth Matters. I'm Richard Nelson, Executive Director of the Commonwealth Policy Center. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and talk to State Senator Robby Mills about some other legislation he's involved with. Stick with us. Welcome back to the Commonwealth Matters. I'm your host, Richard Nelson, and with me in the CPC studio in Frankfort, Kentucky is State Senator Robby Mills. Robby, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Richard. Great to be here.
Hey, it's good to have you here. I need to give a full disclosure. You have been on this program in the past.
I have.
You're a friend and also a former board member of the Commonwealth Policy Center.
Yep.
So appreciate your efforts. Years ago, when we were a fledgling organization, you helped to get us launched with some other like-minded people across.
I believe in the mission and the vision of the organization. It's doing good things throughout our Commonwealth.
Well, I appreciate that. And of course, you are still working to shore up some of the fundamental pillars of society, just in a little different arena. You're now in the
Yes.
State Senate serving there, and we appreciate your efforts. In the previous segment, we just talked about the voter ID bill, Senate Bill 2, which looks like it is on track to become law.
I believe it is.
The support is there in the state Senate. Looks like it's in the state House, and we'll see if Governor Andy Beshear signs it into law. I want to pivot to another issue somewhat related to this, and that's Senate Bill 1. Whenever there's the first bill in either the House or Senate indicates priority legislation.
It does.
Senate Bill 1 is sponsored by State Senator Danny Carroll of Paducah, and this would essentially say that there will be no sanctuary cities in Kentucky. And a sanctuary city essentially is where the local government, city government, says, we don't want local law enforcement cooperating with the federal government when it comes to immigration law.
Right.
This bill was heard in committee recently. However, it was sent back to that committee to be reworked. Tell us more about this bill, Senate Bill 1, the sanctuary city law, and whether you think that this has a chance of making its way through as well.
Well, first of all, Senator Carroll is a former law enforcement. I mean, he has a very good grasp on what is going on the ground level, and I think that's very important that legislators and bureaucrats aren't making rules that are impractical. And this is a very, very practical, timely issue. And basically, it's just broken down to where local law officials have to communicate, have to get along, and work well with federal law enforcement. And that does include immigration, but that does also include a wide range of things that they run into when they're on the street every day. And this comes about by the larger cities, Lexington and Louisville. Their city councils have talked about becoming sanctuary cities, and this is something that we believe in the legislature is a danger to the citizens that we represent, and it rolls into drug trafficking, it rolls into crime, it rolls into our prisons being overcrowded, all of those things that we're tasked with trying to control.
Why would a mayor of a larger city or the city council of one of our larger cities favor what are known as sanctuary cities? What are some of the talking points that you're aware of that would say, hey, we don't want our local police force to cooperate with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement? What would be some of the concerns that they have to say we don't want local enforcement to enforce immigration law?
I mean, it really comes down to numbers and people in the community. It's a liberal talking point that the more immigrants that you might have in the community, the higher their numbers are, and it probably comes down to more of a political question than anything.
Would you say, and I want to throw this is my observation, you're in the arena and you're seeing maybe a little different perspective. Would you say it comes across as harsh or maybe unloving if you have local law enforcement taking families, the mom with the young kids, and then shifting them or bringing them to this federal law enforcement and kind of kicking them out? Or is that the perception? That's what I'm sensing, and it just seems heartless, I guess, is the way
it does. But I mean, ultimately, it comes down to enforcing the law. And when people are in a place illegally, if a crime is committed, or they break the law and they have children in tow, they have assets, cars, and things like that. When you break the law, you end up having to give those up or place them in a place temporarily. And unfortunately, law enforcement is there to have to make those decisions.
Yeah, and I think you can, if you watch the nightly news as to how some immigrant families, illegal immigrants, have been treated, the perception is that this is mean and cruel. And honestly, I'll be very transparent. My heart goes out when I see the mom and the young kids, and I put myself in their shoes, being probably more transparent than I should be. But if I was in Central America and living in those circumstances, I'd want to do everything I could to make a better life for my family, especially my children. However, as you said, something very important, we're a nation of laws. We have a rule of law. There's rules for getting into this country. And unless you are a refugee or of that status, you're fleeing political persecution or religious persecution. Those are two categories of that would create refugee status. Unless that's
Right.
the case, you really have to go through the proper channels to become a U.S. citizen.
That's right. Yeah, I think, and Governor Beshear has actually, since he's been in office, has said we will accept refugees and refugee status folks, and I'm all in favor of that. Folks that have worked hard, that saved money, that are doing things right and coming to this country right to get an education or to work and to fill voids that we have in our workforce. I think that's great. It's the folks that are being told lies by the traffickers, by the human traffickers that are saying, "Come to America and you'll be there and it'll be okay." That's where we're having to enforce the law, unfortunately.
Yeah. This, by the way, this mass migration, illegal migration, if you will, has attracted human traffickers. Just heard a story on the news the other day about a young mom who was approaching the Mexican border with her daughter, young daughter, and as the Mexican authorities came, they were going to arrest her. Somebody snatched her daughter.
Wow.
Possibly a human trafficker, but we do know that there are many human traffickers snatching young kids, or even taking them along the entire journey, posing as a parent, trying to get into this country, and this is an area of concern.
Yeah, I mean, there's crime everywhere, and even in these little pockets of immigrants that are coming into the country, there's criminals feasting on those populations. Yeah. They know that they can't go to law enforcement, and they're just treating people poorly. And so I just think Senate Bill 1 is just a statement from us, law enforcement in the state of Kentucky, that we want local law enforcement to communicate and cooperate with federal government employees. And I believe ultimately that makes people, especially in the larger cities where we do see a larger immigrant population, safer and more secure. And they can, when they see someone from another country that may not look like us, they know that that they're here on correct status and the law's being enforced.
Sure, very good. Robby, the chance of this bill passing, Senate Bill 2?
Senate Bill 2?
I'm sorry, Senate Bill 1.
Yeah, Senate Bill 1.
The Sanctuary City Bill.
I still think that there's a pretty good consensus amongst legislators that this is something that we need to pass, that we need to make a statement, because ultimately it comes down to making Kentucky safer.
Okay, very good. If you're just joining us, you are listening to the Commonwealth Matters. I'm with State Senator Robby Mills. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back to the Commonwealth Matters. I'm your host, Richard Nelson, and in studio in Frankfort, Kentucky is State Senator Robby Mills, and we are talking about the state legislative session. Robby, we talked about the Sanctuary City Bill just a moment ago. We talked about the voter ID bill. I want to pivot to a couple other bills that you are leading in sponsorships. There is a bill, it's originating in the State House, House Bill 67, that would amend the Kentucky Constitution to say that abortion is not a protected right under the Constitution. It would also prohibit public dollars being used for abortion in Kentucky. That bill has several co-sponsors, and it is expected to pass the House. You are the lead person in the State Senate on that bill. Yes. What is your, first of all, give us your take on that bill.
Obviously, I'm pro-life, and I believe the majority of the Kentucky legislature is pro-life. We've made some great strides in that arena, but of course, Governor Beshear is a pro-choice advocate who's actually invited Planned Parenthood to back into the state in a roundabout way. Yeah. And I think it's important for us to continue to make a stand. So, when a bill starts in the House, it has to pass through the Senate. I have contacted Representative Fisher and told him that I'd be happy to carry that bill. So I think it's important to put everything in place, because ultimately we see pro-life cases making its way through the court system. And we need to be prepared when decisions are made by the Supreme Court that we can close the door on future quote-unquote rights of abortions that these kind of activist judges have found all over the country. And that's what this bill does. And, of course, Representative Fisher is an attorney. He understands this issue, and I think the legislation is written really well.
How do you respond to critics who say this is just the Republican conservative attempt to get voters to the polls in November, to advantage them with other offices they're running for?
Well, I mean, you can always turn everything. That's why they call it politics. But you can usually turn everything to some kind of political view. But I think ultimately, folks that are pro-life believe that life is precious, that it begins in the womb, and that it is, we're here to protect life, not only when it's, out and we can see it, but also when it's inside the woman. And I think it's a principle, a core principle to many of the folks that have been elected to the legislature.
Very good. Representative Fisher has said that this law, this amendment to the Constitution, will ensure that there is no Roe v. Wade in Kentucky. And by that, he means the federal ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court essentially invented a right to abortion by construing certain words in the Constitution. When this is spelled out in the Kentucky Constitution, that abortion is not a right found in the Constitution, it just makes clear to any judges that might be tempted to invent a right.
So I think, once again, this is preventative. I mean, we're looking to the future, and I applaud Representative Fisher's efforts and look forward to carrying it in the Senate.
Very good. Robby, we've got a few more minutes to cover a couple of bills that you are leading on. One of the bills in the State Senate that has not been drafted yet, but you expect it to come out soon, is a bill that would prohibit biological males from joining girls' sports teams. Could be a controversial bill. I'm not sure if it's an issue in Kentucky. Is this happening in Kentucky right now, where young boys who identify with the opposite gender are joining girls' sports teams?
Yeah. I'm not aware that it's happening, but it has happened around the nation. And once again, the LGBTQ community is aggressive in this situation, and they are, pushing the law, and we want to be preventative on this.
What do you say to critics who would say, hey, that young boy who identifies as female should have a right to join the girls' volleyball team, the girls' track team?
It's just, males are physiologically different from females. And when you start this gender transitioning and having males competing with females under the guise of being a female, it's just not fair to your daughter, my daughter, and it really ultimately will take away opportunities for female athletes in our state. And it's just unfair. And I think it's something that we need to speak up on.
So what I'm hearing is you're saying this is a matter of fairness and perhaps a matter of protecting girls' sports in Kentucky.
Yeah, it is. And, once again, you did say that it's probably controversial. And but, I'm not afraid to bridge those gaps on a controversial issue. And people either love me or hate me on that. And I'm fine with that. But this is an issue that will be interesting to talk about. And it may be a 2 or 3 year effort.
Sure. We've got just a moment to talk about one more bill that you're going to be the lead on in the State Senate, and this is the Protection of the Biological Integrity of Children Act, I think is what it's going to be called, something along those lines. Right. And this would essentially say that parents or adult caregivers of children in Kentucky cannot do hormone therapy or sex reassignment surgery on minor children.
Right.
Is this an issue that's in Kentucky right now?
It is. I mean, it's coming up all over the nation, and you have parents that are taking 11, 12, 13-year-old children and are giving them hormone therapy to make them change sexes, and it's once again a controversial issue, but it's something that we as believers that believe that God created us male and female, and His creation is perfect. And when we start allowing parents to do things that are harmful to children early on, I think it's a bad precedent. We actually passed a bill yesterday about female genitalia mutilation, and that is similar to it's a parent that's doing a medical procedure to a young child that is brutal, and it's just not good for the child as far as allowing parents to do that.
And FGM, female genital mutilation, is something that originates in usually Muslim countries for religious, purportedly for religious purposes, but that did pass the Senate.
It did pass the Senate, and it's headed to the House. So, I mean, once again, we're talking about defensive measures that are pro-family, that protect children, that protect the family, and I think that conservatives should be standing up for those issues.
Very good. Robby Mills, State Senator from Henderson, thank you so much for joining us on the Commonwealth Matters.
Thanks, Richard. Glad to be here.